When you think about education, about learning today,
Yeah.
gosh, it can really feel like you're just drowning in information.
Oh, absolutely. It's everywhere.
Seriously, it is. And I bet you've wondered, just like I have, what actually gets us motivated to learn in the first place? And maybe even harder, what keeps us going?
Mm-hmm.
You sent us a fantastic collection of material this time, really digging into the heart of motivation and education.
Yeah, some really dense but fascinating stuff. And this deep dive, well, it's designed to cut through all that clutter.
Okay.
We've taken your sources
Yeah.
and we're zeroing in on the key theories about what drives us to learn.
Yeah.
The idea is to give you a clear picture, hopefully without getting lost in all the academic jargon.
Right, like a shortcut.
Exactly. Think of this as your shortcut to understanding what is, let's face it, a pretty intricate area.
Okay, good. So our mission today then is to unpack some of the big hitters in motivation theory. Things like expectancy value theory, social cognitive theory, self-determination theory. What else? Interest theory, achievement goal theory, and attribution theory.
That's the list. 6 key frameworks.
And we want to really understand what makes them tick, right? See where they line up, maybe where they differ, and most importantly, what are the real-world takeaways for you listening?
Absolutely. And to give us a solid roadmap, your sources included a great review article. It organizes these ideas using something called an action model.
An action model. Okay.
Yeah, it basically looks at learning in terms of the situation you're in, your own internal state, the goals you're pursuing, the actions you take, the outcomes of those actions, and then finally, the consequences.
Situation, self-goal, action, outcome, consequences. Okay.
So we'll be using that framework to keep our discussion structured, make sure we hit all the important points. All right, should we dive in?
Yeah, sounds good to me. So let's start with expectancy value theory. As I understand it, the basic idea here, it's kind of intuitive. Our motivation to do something comes down to 2 things. How likely we think we are to succeed, that's the expectancy bit.
Right.
And how much we actually care about the outcome, that's the value.
That's the core of it.
So how does this first theory fit into that action model? Where do expectancy and value sort of slot in?
Well, that's right. And it's interesting how this idea has evolved. Early on, there's this notion that expectancy and value are almost like inversely related.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But the modern view, especially with what's called situated expectancy value theory, Eccles and Wigfield are the key names there sees them as working together. They jointly predict both the choices we make and how well we actually end up doing.
Okay, situated, that sounds important. What makes their theory particularly stand out?
Well, what's fascinating is how they break down both expectancy and value into more specific parts.
Ah.
So for expectancy, they really focus on your expectation of success. That's your belief about how well you'll do on a specific upcoming task. Now, this is a subtle but important distinction. It's not quite the same as your overall self-confidence, your general ability concept.
Right.
Or even self-efficacy, which we'll get to, which is more about your belief in your ability to perform the steps needed for success. Expectation of success is specifically about anticipating the result.
Right. Okay, so it's more about looking ahead to the finish line, kind of.
Exactly.
And you mentioned value also has different facets.
Precisely. They outline 3 key types of what they call subjective task values.
Okay.
First, there's attainment value. This is about how important it is for you personally to do well on a task. It's often linked pretty deeply to your sense of identity.
Okay. Like, I'm a good student, so this task matters.
Sort of, yeah. If you see yourself that way, you'll be more motivated for tasks that reinforce that identity, even if the topic itself isn't your favorite.
Gotcha.
Second is intrinsic value. That's simply the enjoyment or satisfaction you get from doing the task itself. You just find it interesting or fun.
Okay, the pure enjoyment factor.
Right. It's related to intrinsic motivation and interest, which we'll also touch on. But again, technically not exactly synonymous in this theory. And finally, there's utility value.
Utility. Like usefulness.
Exactly. How does this task help you achieve your current goals? Or maybe your future goals? This is more of an extrinsic motivator, really.
Yeah.
It's valuable because it gets you somewhere else, like a stepping stone.
Got it. So it's not just, do I like doing this, but also, is this important for who I am? And will this help me later on? That makes sense. And I think I recall reading something about the costs involved, too. That seemed important.
Yes, absolutely critical. The cost component is a really key part of the modern theory. They identify 3 main types.
Yeah, okay.
First, opportunity costs.
Yeah.
What else could you be doing? What are you giving up by choosing this task over another activity?
Right, the trade-off.
Then there are effort costs. How much effort do you perceive this task will require? And crucially, do you think that effort is actually worthwhile? And finally, emotional costs. These are the negative feelings you might anticipate experiencing, like anxiety, stress, maybe fear of failure.
Wow, okay. That adds a whole other layer.
Yeah.
So going back to our action model then, how do all these pieces, expectancy, the different values, the costs, how do they fit in?
Okay, let's map it. Circling back to that action model, your expectation of success, that directly impacts the self component, your belief about yourself, and your anticipation of the outcome.
Right.
Attainment value really highlights the importance of the outcome. Intrinsic value is linked more to the positive aspects of the action itself, the doing.
Okay.
Utility value points towards positive future consequences. Opportunity costs relate back to the goal because you're choosing this goal over others.
Makes sense.
Effort costs are clearly about the action, how much energy it takes. And those emotional costs, they feed right into the anticipated negative consequences.
That makes the connections really clear, actually. So what does the research say? Do the big meta-analyses generally support this theory and its link to, academic success?
Yeah, they do, but with some interesting nuances. What's fascinating is that meta-analyses tend to show that your expectation of success is actually a stronger predictor of how well you'll perform than how much you value the task overall.
Oh, interesting. Confidence matters more than liking it.
In terms of predicting performance, often yes. We see moderate connections between expectation of success and both your current and future academic achievement.
Okay.
Now, when researchers look at those combined task values, attainment, intrinsic, utility, all lumped together, the relationship with things like GPA and grades is often smaller. Right. However, when they look at each value individually, some interesting patterns pop up. For instance, enjoyment, which aligns with intrinsic value, often shows a stronger positive link to performance.
That makes sense.
And things like math anxiety, which is an emotional cost, well, that, unsurprisingly, has a negative relationship with how well someone does in math.
Okay, so feeling confident you can do it seems to be a major driver, and yeah, genuinely enjoying the process definitely gives you a boost. Let's switch gears now. Social cognitive theory. Bandura's name is really central here, isn't it?
Absolutely. Albert Bandura.
Yeah.
He really expanded on that idea of expectancy, but introduced some really crucial distinctions. He differentiated between what he called competence beliefs, famously known as self-efficacy.
Right, self-efficacy. I've heard that term a lot.
Yeah, it's your belief in your own capabilities to organize and carry out the specific actions needed to succeed on a task.
Okay, so the actions.
Yes. And he distinguished that from control beliefs or outcome expectations. That's your belief that those actions will actually lead to the desired outcome.
Ah, okay, two different beliefs.
Two different, though related beliefs. And Bandura really emphasized that self-efficacy, that belief in your capability to act, is just fundamental. It's often the first step even to get started on the path to academic achievement.
So it's not just about thinking you'll eventually succeed, like with expectancy of success, but believing you can actually handle the steps involved along the way.
Exactly. Believing you can execute the necessary behaviors. And social cognitive theory offers a much broader view than just these two beliefs. It proposes this constant interplay between your internal personal factors like beliefs, goals, your actual behavior, and your external environment. He called this reciprocal determinism.
Reciprocal determinism sounds complex.
It basically means everything influences everything else in a cycle. You influence your surroundings influence you, your thoughts influence your actions influence your thoughts.
Yeah.
It's dynamic.
Okay. So how does this more complex interaction fit within our action model framework?
Good question. Looking at it through the lens of our action model, self-efficacy represents your belief in your capacity to act. Think of it as the agent-means relation.
Agent means, okay.
While outcome expectations represent your belief that those actions will lead to results, the means-ends relation.
Means ends, got it.
And when we consider the broader interacting processes he described, your personal factors, things like your self-efficacy, your values, expectations, personal standards, those align with the self and goal stages in the model.
Right.
Your behavioral processes, the activities you choose, the effort you put in, how persistent you are, those map onto the action and outcome.
That makes sense.
And the environmental processes, things like observing role models, getting instructions, receiving feedback from teachers or peers, those come from the situation and shape the consequences.
Okay.
And it's worth noting, Researchers might define the specific elements within those three interacting processes,
Yeah.
personal, behavioral, environmental, in slightly different ways. But that's the general idea.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these different factors influence each other. It's not just one thing.
Right.
What does the meta-analytic evidence tell us about social cognitive theory and how it relates to achievement?
Well, meta-analyses have pretty consistently shown a moderate positive relationship between self-efficacy and academic achievement. Higher self-efficacy, generally better performance.
Okay, that fits.
Control beliefs, or outcome expectations, also tend to show small positive correlations with things like GPA and grades. Interestingly, when researchers compare these different beliefs, self-efficacy often shows the strongest connections to academic outcomes.
So self-efficacy seems key.
It does. However, and this is a really important, finding some meta-analyses suggest that your past performance is actually a stronger predictor of your current self-efficacy than the other way around.
Oh, wait. So doing well boosts your confidence more than your confidence boosts doing well.
It seems that way, or at least task success is a very powerful builder of self-efficacy. It really highlights the importance of those early successes, those experiences of mastery, in building that confidence for the future.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. It's like a snowball effect, maybe. You succeed, you feel more capable, and then you're more likely to succeed again.
Exactly, that
Yeah.
cycle.
Now, let's move on to self-determination theory. This one. It feels a bit different, doesn't it? Because of its emphasis on internal motivation, having a sense of choice.
You're absolutely right. The self-determination theory, or SDT, developed primarily by Deci and Ryan, is a really comprehensive theory. They call it a macro theory.
Macro theory, okay.
And it puts a really strong emphasis on intrinsic motivation, doing things because they're inherently interesting or enjoyable, and also on feeling autonomous, like you're in control of your actions, and just general psychological well-being. It offers a bit of a contrast to theories that maybe focus more on external rewards and punishments.
Right. I recall reading that it has several mini-theories within it. Are they all important for us?
It does have 6 mini-theories, but for our purposes, we should probably focus on 3 main ones.
Okay, which ones?
First, there's basic psychological needs theory. This is fundamental to SDT. It suggests that all humans have these fundamental innate psychological needs.
Innate needs, like what?
The need for autonomy, that feeling of volition, ownership, self-direction in what you do. The need for competence, feeling effective, capable, successful. And the need for relatedness, feeling connected to, belonging with, and cared for by others.
Autonomy, competence, relatedness.
Okay? And the theory posits that when these needs are satisfied, it really fuels our intrinsic motivation and promotes overall well-being and psychological health.
Makes sense. What's the second one?
Second is cognitive evaluation theory, or CET. This one specifically looks at how the social environment, things like feedback, deadlines, rewards, can impact our intrinsic motivation.
Ah, okay. How external factors affect internal drive.
Precisely. And interestingly, CE key suggests that controlling rewards, like say, you must do this to get that, can actually undermine your intrinsic motivation for an activity you might have otherwise enjoyed.
Really? So trying to incentivize too much can backfire.
It can if it feels controlling. On the other hand, feedback that provides positive information about your competence, that makes you feel capable, can actually strengthen intrinsic motivation.
Interesting balance there. And the third mini theory.
The third one is organismic integration theory, or OIT. This one is really about the different types of motivation and how they lie on a spectrum of self-determination or autonomy.
The spectrum.
Yeah. It ranges from a complete lack of intention or motivation, which they call amotivation.
Okay, like just not caring at all.
Pretty much all the way to that fully self-determined intrinsic motivation where you do it for pure enjoyment. In between those two ends, there are different types of extrinsic motivation.
Ah, so extrinsic isn't just one thing either.
Nope. OIT says extrinsic motivation varies in how much the reason for doing something has been internalized, how much you've taken it on as your own.
Okay, can you break down those different types for us?
Sure. At the least internalized end, the most controlled, we have external regulation. Here, your behavior is driven purely by external factors, chasing rewards or avoiding punishments. Classic carrot and stick.
Right. I'll do my homework so I don't get grounded.
Exactly. Then, a bit more internalized, is interjected regulation. Here, you've started to internalize the reasons, but it's still driven by internal pressure. You do it to feel pride, or, maybe more commonly, to avoid guilt or anxiety. It feels like you should do it.
Okay. Like studying because you feel guilty if you didn't.
Precisely. Next up is identified regulation. Now we're moving towards more autonomous motivation. Here, you consciously value the activity and you personally endorse its importance, even if you don't find it particularly enjoyable in itself. See the point?
Okay, like exercising, because you know it's good for your health, even if you don't love doing it.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
And finally, the most autonomous form of extrinsic motivation is integrated regulation. Here, the activity is not only valued, but it's also fully assimilated into your sense of self. It's congruent with your core values and interests.
So it feels very authentic, very you.
Exactly. Though interestingly, some meta-analyses have found it can be quite difficult to empirically tease apart integrated regulation from intrinsic and identified regulation. They often cluster together.
Ah, okay. So it's almost like a progression from I have to do this because someone else says so, all the way to I'm doing this because it's genuinely important to me, even if it's not always fun.
That's a very accurate way to think about that continuum.
Okay. So how do these core ideas from SDT, the needs, the motivation types, how do they map onto our action model? I was just about to ask that.
Good timing. Well, those basic psychological needs, autonomy, competence, relatedness, they really reside within the self part of the model. They're core aspects of the individual.
Right.
Intrinsic motivation is inherent in the action itself, the quality of the experience of doing it. You're doing it because the action is interesting, enjoyable.
Okay.
Extrinsic motivation, on the other hand, is often tied more directly to the consequences of your actions, the rewards, the punishments, the future goals it helps you reach.
Makes sense.
And that degree of internalization we talked about, external, interjected, identified, integrated, that really reflects how much the self is involved in or endorses the motivation behind the action. More internalization means more self-involvement.
Okay, that connection makes sense. What do the meta-analyses tell us about how SDT relates to academic outcomes? Does satisfying those needs actually lead to better performance?
Generally, yes. The findings support the theory quite well. When those basic psychological needs are met, it's positively associated with more autonomous forms of motivation, like identified and intrinsic.
Good.
And we see a moderate positive correlation between intrinsic motivation and how well students perform in school. Identified motivation also shows positive associations with achievement.
Okay.
These links tend to be stronger, actually, when students self-report their motivation, compared to when researchers use more objective measures of achievement.
Interesting. And what about the less autonomous types, like external regulation?
Yeah, the more controlled forms, interjected and external regulation, some meta-analyses have found weak negative associations with achievement, although this isn't always statistically significant across all studies. So being motivated purely by pressure or external rewards doesn't seem to help performance much. It might even hinder it slightly.
So really nurturing that internal drive, that sense of autonomy and competence in learners, seems pretty important for their academic success. Okay, let's move on to interest theory now. This one feels like it has a strong connection to that intrinsic motivation we were just talking about.
It absolutely does, but interest theory, particularly when viewed through the lens of what's called person-object theory, really emphasizes that interest is about the relationship between a person and a specific object.
Object, like a thing.
Well, it could be a tangible thing, yes, but also other people, abstract topics, specific activities. Basically, whatever the focus of the interest is.
Okay, a person-object relationship.
Right. And for true interest to develop, you typically need to have at least some prior knowledge about that object.
Yeah.
You can't really be interested in something you know absolutely nothing about.
Right, you need a starting point.
hmm
And what are the key characteristics of being in a state of interest? What does that actually feel like?
Interest has some really distinct intrinsic qualities. When you're truly interested, you don't need external pushes or pulls. It's typically characterized by positive affect, pleasant feelings, maybe a sense of excitement or engagement, sometimes described as pleasant tension.
Okay.
It also involves knowledge specifically, an epistemic orientation, a desire to learn more, to find out about the object of interest.
The drive to know more.
Exactly. And third, value the personal significance or meaning you attach to the object or activity. It matters to you.
Okay, affect, knowledge, value. And you mentioned it's different from just curiosity.
Yeah, it's important to distinguish interest from related concepts. Simple curiosity is often more fleeting, maybe triggered by novelty or surprise, whereas interest tends to be more sustained. And it's also different from the state of flow, which is more about complete absorption in an activity, often when challenge and skill are balanced. Interest is specifically about that person-object connection.
Got it. Now, I know there's a distinction often made between individual interest and situational interest. Can you explain that a bit more?
Absolutely, that's a key distinction. Individual interest is seen as more long-lasting, stable predisposition or disposition towards a particular subject, topic, or domain. Think of it almost like a personal passion or a hobby you keep coming back to.
Right, like someone who's always been fascinated by dinosaurs.
Exactly. And fostering these kinds of enduring individual interests is often seen as a really important goal of education, right? Because it can fuel lifelong learning.
Makes sense.
Situational interest, on the other hand, is more temporary. It's triggered by something specific in the environment. In the situation, maybe the catchy presentation, a surprising fact, a hands-on activity.
Okay, so it grabs your attention in the moment.
Right. It can make you more engaged right then and there, even if you don't have a pre-existing individual interest in the topic. And the idea, the hope, really, is that positive experiences with situational interest can sometimes spark and, over time, develop into a more lasting individual interest.
Ah, like a gateway. And when someone is actually feeling interested, that state of interest, how does that fit into our action model?
Okay, mapping it onto the model. Situational interest would really be linked to the situation itself, those environmental cues, the triggers that initially grab your attention.
Right.
Individual interest resides more within the self. It's part of your stored knowledge, your values, the dispositions you bring to the situation.
Okay.
And the actual state of interest, that feeling of being engaged, wanting to learn more, the positive affect that aligns most closely with the action itself. It's the quality of the interaction during the learning process.
Situation triggers it, self-sustains it, action embodies it.
Nicely put.
Ah.
And as we touched on, a less developed form of situational interest, maybe just catching attention, can be seen as an initial phase in the potential development of individual interest.
That makes a lot of sense. So, how does having an interest in something actually affect how well you do academically? What does the research show?
The research here is actually quite clear and consistent.
Mm.
Having an individual interest in a subject is a pretty reliable and stable predictor of academic achievement in that specific area. Meta-analyses consistently show a moderate positive correlation. And what's interesting is that this connection holds up even when you statistically control for other important factors like general intelligence or socioeconomic background.
Wow, so interest really has its own independent effect.
It seems to, yeah. And the strongest links tend to be found in subjects like math and science, interestingly.
Huh. Any idea why?
Not entirely sure. Could be the cumulative nature of those subjects. Maybe interest helps sustain the effort needed over time. It's a good question.
Okay. What about situational interest? Does just making things temporarily interesting help?
Well, yes and no. Research on situational interest, particularly when looking at things like adding seductive details.
Seductive details. Sounds intriguing.
Yeah. It refers to adding interesting but ultimately irrelevant bits of information or flashy graphics to learning materials just to make them more appealing.
Oh, okay. Like adding funny cat pictures to a physics lesson.
Exactly. And while that might grab attention, research has actually shown that these seductive details can have a negative effect on how well people remember the core information, and especially on their ability to transfer that learning to new situations.
Really? So they distract more than they help?
It seems so. They can interfere with building a coherent understanding. So while sparking initial situational interest is definitely beneficial, it really needs to be relevant and connected to the actual learning goals, not just decorative.
That's a really important distinction to keep in mind. Okay, let's move on now to achievement goal theory. This theory, it really focuses on what students are actually trying to accomplish when they're learning, right? Their purpose.
Exactly. Achievement goal theory looks at the different underlying purposes or aims that drive students' engagement in achievement situations, like school. The initial, really key distinction that emerged was between students who were primarily focused on learning, understanding, improving their skills.
Developing competence.
Right, developing competence. These are often called mastery goals. And those students were contrasted with others who were more focused on demonstrating their ability relative to others, getting good grades, appearing smart, or maybe avoiding the appearance of failure.
And those are the performance goals.
Exactly, performance goals, focused on proving competence.
And that initial distinction, mastery versus performance, it's become more nuanced over time, hasn't it? I remember hearing about approach and avoidance goals being added.
Yes, that was a really crucial development. Researchers like Andrew Elliott and others realized that within performance goals, there's a significant difference between wanting to demonstrate your competence and look good compared to others. That's performance approach.
Striving to win or be the best.
Sort of, yeah. And wanting to avoid looking incompetent or failing compared to others. That's performance avoidance.
Okay, train not to look dumb.
Pretty much. And generally, the research found that having performance approach goals was often linked to more adaptive outcomes, like higher grades sometimes, compared to performance avoidance goals, which tend to be associated with more maladaptive outcomes, like increased anxiety, maybe self-handicapping.
That makes intuitive sense. And did they apply approach avoidance to mastery goals too?
They did. Researchers also started to consider mastery avoidance goals. This is a bit more complex, but it involves trying to avoid misunderstanding material or avoid losing skills you've already gained, or maybe avoiding doing worse than you have in the past on a task, avoiding incompetence relative to the task itself or your own past self.
Okay. So not wanting to regress.
Kinda, yeah. Or just avoiding not meeting a standard of mastery.
And then there's that more recent 3x2 model of achievement goals. That sounded a bit more intricate when I read about it.
It is a more detailed way of looking at things, yeah.
Yeah.
The 3x2 model, developed by Elliott and his colleagues, really delves into the different types of standards that people use to evaluate their competence. Yeah. It considers whether your goals are focused on the absolute requirements of the task itself. They call these task-based standards.
Like, did I solve the problem correctly?
Exactly. Or are they focused on your own past performance and striving for personal improvement? Self-based standards.
Am I doing better than I did last time?
Right. Or are they focused on how you compare to others, other-based standards?
Am I doing better than everyone else?
Precisely. So the model takes these three types of standards, task, self, other, and then combines them with the basic approach versus avoidance motivations we just discussed. So you get 6 potential goal types, like task approach, self-avoidance, other approach, etc.
Okay, 6 types.
Now, for simplicity in our discussion today, especially mapping it to the action model, we're mainly focusing on those 3 standard types: task, self, other, and the general approach avoidance aspect. The original 3x2 model does sometimes further distinguish between, say, normative performance goals, beating others, and appearance performance goals, looking smart, but we'll keep it streamlined.
Okay, understood. So how do these different types of achievement goals, task, self, other, approach avoidance, how do they fit into our action framework?
All right, let's map these goals. Task-based goals, where your focus is on achieving a certain level of mastery on the task itself, or avoiding not achieving it. Those are very much outcome-focused in our model. Did I meet the task standard?
Okay.
Self-based goals, where you're striving to improve relative to your past self, or avoid getting worse. Those really connect the self, your past performance, your potential, to the action process of learning and improving.
Right, the journey of self-improvement.
Exactly. And other-based goals, where your primary concern is doing better than others or maybe just not worse than others, those are largely consequences-focused, particularly in terms of social comparison and the social outcomes of performance.
Okay, that really helps visualize those different orientations. What do the meta-analyses tell us about how these various achievement goals actually relate to academic performance?
The research findings here are, again, quite interesting and sometimes complex. We generally see small but fairly consistent positive correlations for both mastery approach goals, that desire to learn and improve, and also for performance approach goals, the aim to do well and demonstrate competence relative to others.
So both wanting to learn and wanting to outperform can be linked to better achievement.
It appears so, at least on average, though the effects are usually small. On the other hand, mastery avoidance goals that concern about losing skills or not understanding, and performance avoidance goals, the desire to avoid looking incompetent, those tend to show small negative relationships with academic achievement.
Okay, avoidance is generally not helpful.
Seems that way. And it's worth noting a nuance. When researchers have looked more closely at that distinction within performance approach goals, sometimes focusing on normative goals, truly wanting to outperform others, has been linked to slightly more positive outcomes than focusing purely on appearance goals, just wanting to look competent without necessarily achieving more. But that's a finer point.
So it seems like, generally, having a focus on learning and growth, mastery approach, is beneficial. But even wanting to do well in comparison to others, performance approach, isn't necessarily a bad thing for achievement, as long as the focus isn't solely on just looking good or avoiding looking bad.
So that's a pretty good summary of the general pattern.
Okay, finally, let's delve into attribution theory. This theory is all about how we explain the reasons behind our successes and failures, right? Like being little detectives about our own lives.
Exactly. Attribution theory, and Bernard Wiener's work is particularly influential here, really focuses on how we make these causal explanations for events, especially when it comes to understanding why we succeed or why we fail at something important.
We're always asking why.
We are. We're kind of like intuitive psychologists, constantly trying to figure out the causes of what happens to us. And this attribution process, this search for why, it often gets triggered most strongly when the outcomes are important to us, when they're unexpected, or especially when they're negative, like failure.
Right, we really want to know why we failed. And what are the key dimensions or categories that we use when we're trying to explain these outcomes? Remember, there were three main ones.
Yes, Wiener proposed a really influential three-dimensional framework for understanding these causal attributions. The first dimension is the locus of causality.
Locus, like location.
Exactly. Is the cause something internal to us, like our own effort, our ability, our mood? Or is it external, like the difficulty of the task, the teacher's bias, or just plain luck?
Yeah.
Internal versus external.
Okay, dimension one, what's two?
The second dimension is stability over time.
Yeah.
Is the cause something that's relatively stable and enduring, something that won't change much from one situation to the next, like maybe your inherent aptitude for a subject or the consistent difficulty of a particular course?
Right. Stable.
Or is it something unstable and variable, something that could easily be different next time? Like how much effort you put in on one specific day or a sudden headache or a lucky guess. Stable versus unstable.
Okay, internal, external, stable, unstable. And the third?
The third dimension is controllability. Is the cause something that we perceive we can influence or control?
Oh,
For
okay.
example, we usually feel we can control how much effort we put into studying. That's generally seen as controllable. But we often feel we can't control our innate ability or maybe the inherent difficulty of an exam set by the teacher. So controllable versus uncontrollable.
Okay, so we're constantly, maybe unconsciously, trying to categorize why things happened along these lines. Internal or external, stable or unstable, and controllable or uncontrollable. How does this whole process fit into our overarching action model? Where do attributions come in?
Good question. Within our model, the process of making attributions really kicks in after the outcome has occurred.
Oh, it's post hoc.
Exactly. It's a reflection on what happened. So you experience success or failure, the outcome. This usually triggers some initial general affect, feeling good after success, feeling bad after failure. You then attribute that outcome to some cause using those dimensions we just discussed. Maybe you attribute it to your own dispositions like your ability, internal stable, or your effort, internal unstable, controllable, or maybe just to factors in the situation, task difficulty, external stable, luck, external unstable, uncontrollable.
Okay.
These specific attributions then go on to influence other, more specific emotions like pride, if you attribute success to effort, or maybe shame, if you attribute failure to lack of ability. And crucially, these attributions and emotions then feed forward, influencing your future expectations, motivation, and striving in similar situations.
So if I attribute a poor grade to something I believe I can control, like, say, not studying enough, internal, unstable, controllable, I might be more motivated to put in more effort next time.
Precisely. That attribution suggests change is possible and under your control, which is generally motivating. Whereas if you attribute failure to lack of innate ability, internal, stable, uncontrollable, you might feel helpless and be less motivated next time.
Okay, that makes the link clear. So what do the meta-analytic findings tell us about how our attribution styles relate to our academic achievement?
Well, research has shown pretty clear links between how controllable we perceive the causes of events to be and our subsequent performance. Believing you have control is generally adaptive.
Okay.
Also, the specific patterns of attributions matter. For instance, how we attribute outcomes, whether we tend to see successes as due to internal factors and failures as due to stable factors that can influence our expectations for the future, which then mediate the link to performance.
Mediated relationships. Okay.
Yeah, interestingly, there's often a tendency, particularly observed among children, but also adults, to show what's called an egotistic bias or self-serving bias.
Egotistic bias.
Yeah, it's a tendency to attribute our successes to internal factors. I succeeded because I'm smart, worked hard. And our failures to external factors. I failed because the test was unfair, I had bad luck. It protects our ego.
Ah, yeah, I can see that.
Generally speaking, though, attributing outcomes to more internal and controllable causes like effort is often linked to better academic achievement over time.
So taking responsibility, essentially.
In a constructive way, yes. And regarding overall attribution styles, having a generally optimistic attribution style, seeing positive events as internal, stable, and global, and negative events as external, unstable, and specific, shows a weak positive relationship with performance in some studies. But interestingly, Having a pessimistic attribution style doesn't seem to have a consistently significant negative relationship with it in many meta-analyses.
That's surprising.
It is a bit, but overall, it really seems like believing that you have some level of personal control over your learning outcomes, whether they're positive or negative, and attributing them in ways that foster future effort. That seems to be a key factor in driving motivation and ultimately achievement.
Wow. This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into these 6 major theories of motivation and education. It's really striking to see how each theory offers a distinct yet often complementary, sometimes overlapping perspective on what really drives us to learn and achieve.
It is fascinating, isn't it, how they approach it from different angles.
Yeah, and the action model we've been using, situation, self, goal, action, outcome, consequences, that's been so helpful in seeing how all the different pieces, the expectancies, the values, the needs, the goals, the attributions, to how they fit into that larger picture of the learning process.
Absolutely. It provides a useful structure for comparison. And our hope is that for you, our listener, this deep dive has provided a really structured and clear understanding, hopefully taking you beyond just knowing the names of these theories to truly grasping their core ideas, their nuances, and maybe some of the empirical evidence that either supports or sometimes challenges them.
Definitely. So as we start to wrap things up, here's maybe a final thought for you listening to chew on. Considering that, as we heard, these various motivation theories often show only small to medium correlations with actual academic achievement.
Mm-hmm. It's an important point.
What other factors, maybe personal, social, environmental, what other things do you think might play an equally or maybe even a more significant role in nurturing that lifelong love of learning, that real pursuit of mastery?
That's a really crucial question to ponder, isn't it?
It really makes you think about the complex interplay of all these different forces in our own learning journeys and maybe in the experiences of students or colleagues or even our kids.
It absolutely does.
Hmm.
And it truly highlights the multifaceted nature of human motivation. It's rarely just one thing. Perhaps in some of our future deep dives, we could even explore some of those related concepts that were maybe briefly mentioned in your sources, things like the role of grit and perseverance,
Oh, yeah, grit.
or the experience of flow,
Hmm.
or the powerful influence of social dynamics and relationships on our motivation to learn.
That sounds like a great plan for future explorations. There's clearly always more to unpack.
Always more.
Well, thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive today.
My pleasure.